I'm Jennifer, 26. My stepdad shoved me aside on Christmas for his real daughter, forgetting the most important detail. I'm the one who owns the house. The turkey weighed 20 pounds, slipping slightly in my oven mitts as I heaved it out of the heat. The smell of rosemary, sage, and roasted garlic filled the kitchen, the scent of a perfect Christmas. Or at least the scent of $200 worth of groceries I'd bought on Tuesday. My back ached. I'd been on my feet since 6 in the morning, peeling potatoes, glazing carrots, and making sure the stuffing wasn't too dry, just the way my mother liked it. "Jen, can you keep it down in there? I'm trying to hear the game." Gary's voice boomed from the living room, rough and demanding. I gritted my teeth, setting the roasting pan onto the trivets with a heavy clank. Through the archway, I could see the back of his bald head sinking into the leather recliner. The recliner I had bought him last year when he claimed his back was too far gone to work anymore. Strange how his back was only bad on weekdays. On Saturdays, his golf swing was miraculous. "Sorry, Gary," I called back, my voice flat. "Just taking dinner out." My mother, Susan, shuffled into the kitchen. She looked tired, clutching a glass of white wine like it was a life preserver. She didn't offer to help. She just leaned against the granite island, watching me baste the bird. "Is it almost ready?" she asked, eyeing the oven clock. "Brittany just texted. She's parking now." "It's ready when the thermometer says it's ready, Mom," I said, wiping sweat from my forehead with the back of my wrist. "Did Brittany bring the pies or the wine? She said she'd handle dessert." Mom looked away, swirling her drink. "Oh, you know how she is, Jen. She's had a rough month. That job at the boutique didn't work out. The manager was out to get her. Besides, she's bringing her new boyfriend, Kyle. We want to make a good impression." I sighed, untying the end knot at my waist. Fine, I'm always the bigger person. The front door burst open, letting in a swirl of freezing Ohio air and the loud, chaotic energy that was my stepsister. "Merry Christmas, freaks!" Brittany shouted. She stomped the snow off her boots directly onto the hardwood floor I had just mopped. Gary was up out of his recliner in a flash, his bad back forgotten. "There she is! There's my girl!" He waddled over to hug her, ignoring the tall, lanky guy trailing behind her, carrying nothing but a vape pen. Brittany looked great, I had to admit. Perfect hair, expensive coat, nails done. She looked like someone who didn't have a care in their world. She looked like someone who hadn't paid a bill in her life. "Hey, Jen," Brittany said, tossing her coat on the banister instead of hanging it up. She handed me a plastic grocery bag. "Mom said you needed help with laundry. I brought a few loads, since you're doing yours anyway." I stood there, holding the bag of dirty clothes, while the smell of the turkey I cooked wafted around us. Gary was already pouring Brittany a drink, laughing at something she said, his face lighting up in a way it never did for me. "Thanks," I said, my grip tightening on the plastic bag. "Just what I wanted for Christmas." The dining room looked like a magazine spread. I had ironed the tablecloth myself, polishing the silver until it gleamed under the chandelier light. I carried the turkey in, placing it in the center of the table with a triumphant thud. Steam curled up, carrying the rich scent of sage and butter, but nobody looked at the food. They were all looking at Brittany. "So Kyle is thinking about getting into crypto," Brittany was saying, her mouth full of a bread roll she hadn't waited for me to serve. "It's really smart. Tell him, babe." Kyle, a guy with frosted tips who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, just shrugged. "Yeah, it's the future." "That's fantastic," Gary boomed, slapping the table. "See, Susan, that's ambition, unlike some people who just settle for a paycheck." He didn't look at me, but the dig landed exactly where he intended. I unclenched my jaw and went to the sideboard to grab the wine. "Dinner is ready, everyone. Please sit." We had a nice oak dining set with 6 high-backed, cushioned chairs. There were 5 of us tonight: Gary, Mom, Brittany, Kyle, and me. But as I turned around with the wine bottle, I noticed something odd. One of the oak chairs was missing. In its place, jammed into the corner near the kitchen door, was a rusty metal folding chair, the kind we used for painting the garage. "Where's the other chair?" I asked, confused. "Oh, the leg was wobbly," Gary said dismissively, waving a hand. "I put it in the shed." I frowned. That chair had been perfectly fine yesterday when I dusted it. But I didn't want to argue. I just wanted to eat the meal I had spent 2 days preparing and then go to sleep. Everyone moved to the table. Gary took the head, naturally. Mom took her usual spot to his right. Brittany and Kyle moved toward the other side. I walked toward the empty, cushioned chair on Gary's left, my usual spot. It was close to the kitchen, which made it easy for me to get up and refill drinks, something I did every year. I reached for the back of the chair to pull it out. Thud. A heavy hand slammed into my shoulder. I stumbled, my hip checking hard into the sideboard. The wine bottle in my hand nearly shattered. "Whoa there," Gary barked, his face twisting into a sneer. He hadn't just bumped me, he had shoved me. Hard. The room went dead silent. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. "Gary?" whispered Mom, her eyes wide. Gary didn't look at her. He stared directly at me, his face flushing a deep, angry red. He placed a possessive hand on the back of the cushioned chair I had tried to sit in. "Don't be disrespectful," he spat, his voice dripping with venom. "You think you can just waltz in here and take the best spot after Brittany traveled all this way?" "I live here, Gary," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "Not anymore," he said. He gestured grandly to Brittany. "This seat is for my real daughter, the one who actually appreciates family." He pointed a thick, calloused hand toward the corner of the room, toward the rusty, paint-stained metal folding chair. "You sit over there," he commanded. "You're lucky we even let you eat with us." Brittany giggled. It was a nervous, high-pitched sound, but she didn't object. She just smirked, slid past me, and sat in the cushioned chair. "Thanks, Daddy," she cooed. I stood frozen, the phantom pain of his hand still throbbing on my shoulder. I looked at the metal chair, then I looked at my mother. She was staring intently at her napkin, refusing to meet my eyes. The silence stretched so tight I thought it might snap and take my head off. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. I didn't look at Gary, and I didn't look at Brittany, who was now picking at a loose thread on the tablecloth to hide her smirk. I looked at my mother. She was the only lifeline I had left in this room. Surely this was the line. Shoving me, calling me not real family, telling me to sit in the dirt corner while his unemployed daughter ate the food I paid for? "Mom?" My voice was small, a child's voice I hated using. "Are you hearing this?" Susan finally looked up, but she didn't look at me with anger or defense. She looked at me with exhaustion. She swirled the Chardonnay in her glass, her eyes darting between Gary's red face and my trembling hands. "Jen," she sighed, the sound heavy with resignation. "Please, just sit in the other chair." My stomach dropped through the floor. "What?" "Don't cause a scene, honey," she mumbled, taking a quick sip of wine. "It's Christmas. Let's just eat. The turkey is getting cold." Something inside me broke. It wasn't a loud break, like a plate shattering. It was a quiet, structural failure. The support beam that held up my love for this family just gave way. I looked at the folding chair. It was gray, with flecks of white paint on the seat from when I painted the trim on the garage last summer. I looked at the table, the roast turkey, $45, the crystal wine glasses, my gift to Mom 3 years ago, the chandelier above us, I paid the electrician, the heat vent rattling in the floor, I paid the gas bill yesterday. I wasn't a daughter to them. I was an ATM with a pulse. I was the live-in maid who paid for the privilege of scrubbing their toilets. A strange, icy calm washed over me. The shaking in my hands stopped. The tears that had been pricking my eyes evaporated. I set the wine bottle down on the sideboard with a deliberate clink. "You know what?" I said, my voice steady and cool, startlingly different from the whimper I'd let out a moment ago. "You're right, Gary." Gary blinked, clearly expecting a fight he could win by yelling louder. "I am?" "Absolutely," I said. I smoothed down the front of my sweater. "I shouldn't be sitting at the head of the table. In fact, if this seat is for real family only, I shouldn't be here at all." Gary let out a bark of a laugh, grabbing a bread roll. "Oh, don't be dramatic. Good, go cry in your room. We'll leave you some scraps." "No," I said, grabbing my purse from the counter where I'd left it. I fished my car keys out of the pocket. The metal felt biting and cold in my palm. I turned to the door. "Jen?" Mom called out, her voice rising in sudden panic. "Jen, where are you going? We haven't even said grace." "I'm going where I'm not lucky to be allowed to eat," I said without looking back. I walked out of the dining room, down the hallway, and opened the heavy front door. The winter wind bit at my face, stinging my cheeks, but it felt cleaner than the air inside that house. Behind me, I heard the confused scrape of a chair, and Gary shouting something about me being an ungrateful brat. I slammed the door shut, cutting off his voice. I walked down the driveway to my car, the snow crunching satisfyingly under my boots. I didn't have a coat, but for the first time in years, I didn't feel the cold. I felt fire. I didn't go far. I drove 3 streets over to Sarah's house. Sarah was my best friend, the kind of person who didn't ask questions when you showed up on her doorstep on Christmas Day shivering in a sweater, your mascara running down your cheeks. "Oh my God, Jen," Sarah said, pulling me inside. The smell of her house was different. Cinnamon candles and peace. No shouting. No walking on eggshells. "Here, sit. I'm pouring you a mega pint." 10 minutes later, I was wrapped in a fuzzy blanket on her couch, a glass of red wine in one hand and my laptop in the other. I wasn't crying anymore. The sadness had calcified into something harder, something sharp. "So let me get this straight," Sarah said, sitting cross-legged opposite me. "He pushed you? Physically pushed you?" "Yep," I said, staring at the booting screen of my MacBook, and then told me my seat was for his real daughter. "And your mom just sat there?" She told me not to make a scene. Sarah slammed her hand down on the coffee table. "I hate them. I actually hate them. You pay for everything, Jen. The food, the trips, the damn roof over their heads." "I know," I said softly. My screen lit up, casting a blue glow over my face. And that's exactly what they forgot. I opened a browser window. My fingers hovered over the trackpad. For 2 years, I had managed the entire household infrastructure because Gary didn't trust computers and Mom always lost the passwords. They thought I was just the IT girl. They didn't realize that being the IT girl meant I held the keys to the kingdom. "What are you doing?" Sarah asked, leaning in. "Gary wants me to know my place," I muttered. "I'm showing him his." I navigated to the smart home dashboard. It was a centralized system I'd installed last year to help save on energy bills. It controlled the lights, the locks, and most importantly, the thermostat. I clicked on Climate tab. Current temperature, 72 degrees F. Status, heating. I could picture them there. Gary fat and happy with his wine, Brittany laughing with her mouth full, Mom trying to pretend everything was normal. I clicked Mode, Eco. Then I clicked Manual Override. I dragged the slider down. 70, 60, 55, 50 degrees F. 50 degrees? Sarah whispered, eyes wide. "Jen, it's like 10 degrees outside." "Then they'd better put on a sweater," I said. I clicked Lock Interface. Now they couldn't change it back from the wall unit. They would need the passcode. And I was the only one who had it. Next tab, SpectraLink Internet Services. I logged into the admin portal. I saw the list of connected devices. Gary's iPad, living room TV, Brittany's iPhone, Kyle's iPhone. "They're streaming the football game right now," I said. "Gary lives for the Christmas game." I moved the cursor to the master toggle switch. Suspend service. Click. Ouch, Sarah said, grinning. No Wi-Fi? How will Brittany upload her selfies? She won't, I said. I wasn't done. I opened my banking app. This was the big one. The house was in my name, bought with the life insurance money from my biological dad plus my savings, but I had given Gary and Mom supplementary credit cards for groceries and emergencies. I pulled up the recent transactions. Liquor store, $85. Today. Gas station, $60. Today. Sephora, $210. Yesterday. Brittany, authorized user. Unbelievable, I breathed. Brittany was using the emergency card. I selected both cards. Status, active. I changed it to reported lost or stolen, freeze immediately. I closed the laptop and took a long, slow sip of wine. So, I said, looking at Sarah, how long do you think it takes before the screaming starts? As if on cue, my phone, sitting on the coffee table, lit up. Incoming call, Gary. I let it ring. I'm Jennifer, 26. My stepdad shoved me aside on Christmas for his real daughter, forgetting the most important detail. I'm the one who owns the house. The turkey weighed 20 pounds, slipping slightly in my oven mitts as I heaved it out of the heat. The smell of rosemary, sage, and roasted garlic filled the kitchen, the scent of a perfect Christmas. Or at least the scent of $200 worth of groceries I'd bought on Tuesday. My back ached. I'd been on my feet since 6 in the morning, peeling potatoes, glazing carrots, and making sure the stuffing wasn't too dry, just the way my mother liked it. Jen, can you keep it down in there? I'm trying to hear the game. Gary's voice boomed from the living room, rough and demanding. I gritted my teeth, setting the roasting pan onto the trivets with a heavy clank. Through the archway, I could see the back of his bald head sinking into the leather recliner. The recliner I had bought him last year when he claimed his back was too far gone to work anymore. Strange how his back was only bad on weekdays. On Saturdays, his golf swing was miraculous. Sorry, Gary, I called back, my voice flat. Just taking dinner out. My mother, Susan, shuffled into the kitchen. She looked tired, clutching a glass of white wine like it was a life preserver. She didn't offer to help. She just leaned against the granite island, watching me baste the bird. Is it almost ready? She asked, eyeing the oven clock. Brittany just texted. She's parking now. It's ready when the thermometer says it's ready, Mom, I said, wiping sweat from my forehead with the back of my wrist. Did Brittany bring the pies or the wine? She said she'd handle dessert. Mom looked away, swirling her drink. Oh, you know how she is, Jen. She's had a rough month. That job at the boutique didn't work out. The manager was out to get her. Besides, she's bringing her new boyfriend, Kyle. We want to make a good impression. I sighed, untying the end knot at my waist. Fine, I'm always the bigger person. The front door burst open, letting in a swirl of freezing Ohio air and the loud, chaotic energy that was my stepsister. Merry Christmas, freaks! Brittany shouted. She stomped the snow off her boots directly onto the hardwood floor I had just mopped. Gary was up out of his recliner in a flash, his bad back forgotten. There she is, there's my girl. He waddled over to hug her, ignoring the tall, lanky guy trailing behind her, carrying nothing but a vape pen. Brittany looked great, I had to admit. Perfect hair, expensive coat, nails done. She looked like someone who didn't have a care in their world. She looked like someone who hadn't paid a bill in her life. Hey, Jen, Brittany said, tossing her coat on the banister instead of hanging it up. She handed me a plastic grocery bag. Mom said you needed help with laundry. I brought a few loads, since you're doing yours anyway. I stood there, holding the bag of dirty clothes, while the smell of the turkey I cooked wafted around us. Gary was already pouring Brittany a drink, laughing at something she said, his face lighting up in a way it never did for me. Thanks, I said, my grip tightening on the plastic bag. Just what I wanted for Christmas. The silence didn't last long. It was broken by a ping, then another, then a cascade of chimes that sounded like a slot machine paying out a jackpot. My phone screen, still face up on the coffee table, lit up with a kaleidoscope of notifications. Message from Mom. Jen, please pick up. Message from Gary. You're making a huge mistake. Message from Brittany. WTF, Jen? My data is barely working in this basement. Message from Mom. He's sorry, he didn't mean it. Please turn the heat back on. I stared at the bubbles popping up, one after another. My heart gave a painful little squeeze at my mother's texts. That was the trap, wasn't it? Gary was the hammer, but Mom was the guilt. She knew exactly how to twist the knife to make me feel like I was the one ruining Christmas. Don't look at them, Sarah said, reaching out to flip my phone over. I have to see, I said, stopping her hand. I need to know they understand I'm serious. I picked up the phone. My thumb hovered over the conversation with Mom. Mom, Jen, you know how his temper is. He's in pain. Just come back, unlock the system, and we can talk about this in the morning. Don't do this to the family. I typed back, my fingers flying. I am not doing this to the family. I am doing this for myself. I am not coming back tonight. Then I opened Brittany's thread. Seriously? I can't upload my story and it's freezing. Stop being a psycho and fix the Wi-Fi. I almost laughed. Not a word about the eviction, not a word about me being shoved, just her inconvenience. It was so perfectly, predictably Brittany. I didn't even reply to her. Blocked. Then Gary. You think you're smart? You can't evict us. I have rights, squatters' rights. I'll call a lawyer. Gary. Pick up the phone, Jennifer. Gary. I'm warning you. He's threatening to call a lawyer, I told Sarah, showing her the screen. Sarah snorted into her wine. With what money? His credit card is frozen, and good luck finding a lawyer on Christmas Day who works for free. She was right. The fear that usually gripped me when Gary yelled, the conditioning of a decade of walking on eggshells, began to dissolve. He was a paper tiger. Without my money, without my house, without my compliance, he was just an angry old man shouting into a dead phone in a freezing house. I'm done, I whispered. It felt like setting down a heavy backpack I'd been carrying for a 10-mile hike. I went to the settings menu. I scrolled down to Do Not Disturb. Then I went a step further. I held down the power button on the side of the phone. Slide to power off. The screen went black. Good, Sarah said softly. Now drink your wine. We have Hallmark movies to watch, and I promise none of them involve rusty folding chairs. I leaned back into the couch cushions. For the first time in years, I didn't know what was happening in my own house. I didn't know if they were eating the cold turkey. I didn't know if they were huddled under blankets. And for the first time in years, I didn't care. I didn't turn my phone back on until the morning of December 27th. When I finally held the power button down, the device vibrated continuously for 3 solid minutes. 42 missed calls, 63 text messages, 18 voicemails, requested a civil standby. 2 hours later, I pulled into the driveway of my own house. A black and white police cruiser was already parked there, idling, exhaust puffing into the gray winter air. The house looked dead. The inflatable Santa on the lawn was deflated, a sad puddle of red plastic on the frost. The blinds were drawn tight. Without the smart lights scheduled to turn on, the windows were dark eyes staring back at me. I stepped out of my car. Officer Miller, a burly man with a kind face, stepped out of his cruiser. Miss Davis, he asked, you're just here to retrieve personal property, correct? Yes, officer, and to ensure the eviction notice is physically received. I unlocked the front door. The air inside hit me instantly. It was stale and frigid. The thermostat was still locked at 50 degrees. Gary was sitting on the sofa, wrapped in 3 blankets, wearing a beanie. When he saw the door open, he shot up, his face a mask of exhaustion and stubble. "You came back," he croaked, a flicker of hope in his eyes. Then he saw Officer Miller step in behind me. The hope vanished, replaced by a dark, cornered animal fear. "What is this? You brought the cops?" "I brought a witness," I said simply. I didn't stop to look at him. I walked past the living room toward my home office. Mom came out of the kitchen. She looked 10 years older than she had 2 days ago. Her eyes were red-rimmed and swollen. "Jen," she wept, reaching out a hand but stopping short when she saw the officer. "Jen, please, it's freezing. The water heater isn't working right because the system is messed up. We've been heating water on the stove." "Brittany left yesterday," Gary spat, with his voice trembling with rage and cold. "She left us, Jen." He said it like it was my fault, like I had chased her away, not the lack of luxury. "Smart girl," I said, grabbing my birth certificate, passport, and the deed to the house from my safe. I stuffed them into my tote bag. I guess she figured out there isn't any here anymore. I moved to the bedroom, throwing clothes into a suitcase. Mom followed me in, hovering in the doorway, wringing her hands. "He's sorry, Jen," she whispered. "He was just stressed. He loves you." I stopped packing and looked at her, really looked at her. "No, Mom, he loves the house. He loves the credit card. He loves having a maid. And you love the peace he gives you when he has a punching bag. But I'm done being the bag." I walked back into the living room. Gary was standing there, shivering, looking small and pathetic in his pile of blankets. "You can't do this," he said, but the fight was gone from his voice. "Where are we supposed to go? Rents are crazy." I pulled a thick envelope from my bag and set it on the coffee table, right next to the dead remote control. "That is the formal 30-day notice. You have until January 26th. If you aren't out, the sheriff comes next, and he won't be as polite as Officer Miller." "Jen." I unlocked the thermostat, I said, walking to the door. "You can have heat for the next 30 days. Consider it a parting gift. But the internet stays off, and the cards stay canceled." I opened the door, letting the winter sunlight slice into the gloom. "Goodbye, Gary. Goodbye, Mom." I walked out to my car, Officer Miller trailing behind me. As I backed out of the driveway, I saw the blinds twitch. They were watching me leave, but this time I wasn't running away. I was moving on. The ink on the closing documents was still wet when I walked out of the title company's office into the crisp March air. It was done. The house was sold. I had walked through it one last time yesterday for the final inspection. It had been strange to see the rooms empty. Gary and Mom had cleared out exactly on day 29. In a final act of petty revenge, they had taken every light bulb from the fixtures and even unscrewed the switch plates from the walls. I didn't care. I just laughed, wrote a check to the handyman to fix it, and sold the place for $40,000 over the asking price. The market was hot. Unlike Gary's temper, which I heard was currently simmering in a humid one-bedroom-a-basement apartment on the wrong side of town. "You look like you just won the lottery," Sarah said, sliding into the booth opposite me. We were meeting for lunch at Le Monde, the most expensive French bistro in the city. "Better," I said, placing the folder of sale documents on the table. "I just lost 200 pounds of dead weight." The waiter arrived, placing a basket of warm bread and chilled butter between us. "Champagne to start?" "A bottle," I said, "the vintage." Sarah grinned, snapping a breadstick in half. "So, do you want the tea? My cousin works at the urgent care near their new place." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to say no, to erase them completely, but the human part of me, the part that had been shoved and humiliated on Christmas, needed the epilogue. "Tell me," I said. "Gary is working," Sarah said, leaning in conspiratorially. He's a greeter at the big box store, standing on his feet for 8 hours a day. Apparently, his bad back made a miraculous recovery once there was no one else to pay the rent. I took a sip of water, savoring the coolness. And Mom? She calls Brittany every day, Sarah said, shaking her head. But Brittany blocked them both the second the money ran out. She's living with some DJ in Florida now. She told a mutual friend that her parents were toxic and bringing her down. I laughed, a genuine, deep sound that came from my belly. The irony is almost poetic. It really is, Sarah agreed. They sacrificed their relationship with the daughter who paid the bills to please the daughter who just created them, and now they have neither. The waiter returned with the champagne. He popped the cork with a soft thump, a much more pleasant sound than a fist hitting a shoulder. He poured 2 flutes of bubbling gold liquid. To the sale, Sarah toasted, raising her glass. To the eviction, I corrected, clinking my glass against hers. I took a sip. It tasted like freedom. I looked around the restaurant. It was crowded, buzzing with conversation and laughter. We were sitting at the best table in the house, a semi-circular booth by the window bathed in natural light with a view of the city skyline. I settled back into the plush velvet cushion. It was soft, it was sturdy, and most importantly, I had paid for it. My phone buzzed on the table. I glanced down. It was a text from an unknown number, but the preview text started with, "Jen, please, it's Dad. I just need a small loan for—" I didn't even read the rest. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness. I felt nothing but the mild annoyance of a spam caller. I swiped left. Block caller. Then I put the phone face down, picked up the menu, and turned to Sarah. I think I'm going to order the lobster. After all, I'm the one paying the bill.